Welcome to the Lasting Mission podcast, where we share the voices and experiences of veterans and their families. I'm your host for today, Britt Myers, and I'm joined by Katt Whittenberger, who's the founder and executive director of Mountain Valor. So thank you so much for coming on with us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course. Okay, so looking back, you've had a really long military career, which is so admirable. Tell me about what inspired you to join the Navy.
Well, I'm from the Midwest,
Okay.
and I didn't want to stay there. So I wanted to see the ocean. I wanted to have adventure. At the time, there was a commercial that was on. There was a recruiting commercial for the Navy, and it had this petty officer that was leaning against the lifelines on a ship talking about adventure and seeing the world and being a broadcast journalist. And I said, that's it, I'm doing that. And so I did.
Did you have anybody else in your family who had served, or did you
My
take
grandfather served in the Air Force, but that was a very long. I mean, that was World War II. So other than that, no, I was it. So it was really, I was just jumping off a cliff.
Oh my gosh. And was there a lot of females that you were joining with in the Navy at that time? I can't imagine
Oh
there
no,
was. No.
no,
Yeah.
no. It was, when you sign up and you sign the paperwork I signed when I was 17. So then I was in the delayed entry program, which basically means that like once a month you go to your recruiter's office and you practice drill and you start to memorize some of the things that they want you to know for boot camp, which did come in really handy. But yeah, I was always the only girl.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so what year did you end up actually going in?
So I shipped to boot camp in July of 2000.
Okay, and what was your experience like? That first time you saw the ship, were you just in awe, or?
Yes. So the first time that you walk up to an aircraft carrier, that was my first ship, was the USS Theodore Roosevelt.
Wow, you really went big.
Oh yeah, yeah, as big as you can go.
Yeah.
So those things are 4 football fields long, right? And you can only see about 2/3 of the ship is above the water, and it's insane. I remember looking at it and being like, how does this thing float?
Yeah.
And it's, you have to climb up all these stairs just to get on it. And then you have to render honors when you walk aboard. And it's, the whole process is so intimidating. And so you spend your first week really learning like how to get on the ship, how to get off the ship, where you work, where you eat, and where you sleep. And that is enough of a maze. You don't really vary from those paths because you're just going to get really lost.
Yeah, and then once you find your way, you kind of have the sense of community that's already built in. I mean, you can't go anywhere. So whether you are fighting or enjoying your time with everybody, you're locked in. You're all there. Yeah.
Well, and we have, my opinion is that we definitely have the smallest living spaces. So our racks are 3 high, and they're very tiny. I mean, they're about shoulder width. I know a lot of the guys, when they would roll over, their shoulders would hit the rack above them. And all your worldly goods you can lift your rack up and there's a shelf about this deep, the whole width and depth of your rack. And then you have like a little tiny locker that's like this, that's like just long enough to hang a shirt in without it wrinkling. And that's where you put all your stuff. That's
Wow.
it. That's all you got.
Okay, so this is random, but one of my close friends, her dad is 6'5", and they went and toured, I don't know what size ship it was, but he had the hardest time fitting even through the doorways. Do they have like max height restrictions to join the
No,
Navy?
and one of my admirals, the man was like 6'7", and he was a submariner. And so when I finally got up the courage to ask him, I was like, how did you fit in there? He said there were 2 places he could stand up in that sub, and he stayed in those 2 places.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Very smart. Yeah.
That's why he made Admiral.
Exactly. Well, it sounds like your first year was probably just kind of getting your feet under you, if you will, getting your sea legs, just making that transition over from civilian to military life. But then, as we talked about a little bit for September 11th episode, you also had a pretty unique experience after that first year, in that when those events happened and that tragedy occurred, it really set you on a different trajectory with the Navy. Is that
Very
accurate?
much so.
Yeah.
So September 11th happened about a week after I checked on board the ship, and then about a week later, 9 days later, we deployed. So we were one of the first ships to go over. We were the night flight operations ship. So it was our aircraft that were flying at night, and that way we had a 24-hour basically munitions package between the other ships that were over there that were launching during that day. And that was just absolutely incredible to be part of that.
Yeah. Did you ever go out onto the deck at night?
So you can't go on the flight deck when there's flight operations going on.
Oh, obviously, I
That's how you
knew
get
that.
blown over the side.
Yeah.
But you can go up to the signal bridge, and so that is on the like it's 9 levels above the flight. Well, technically 6 levels above the flight deck, and you can observe what it's like, and you're looking down on it. And especially with night operations, there's so many cool lights. So you have the guys that are directing where the aircraft are being moved, and they've got the lights in their hands, and the different way they wave them is telling them different things: speed up, slow down, turn this way, turn that way, stop, all that. And then the jets power on, so you see all that, and it's just really neat.
That's so cool. Did you ever hang out with the pilots then?
No, because my job was public affairs, I interviewed a lot of them.
Cool.
And that was always interesting to hear their stories and what they could see. We were lucky enough that our commanding officer was really big on showing the crew the consequences of our actions. So both in a good way and a bad way. When we screwed up, we also got to see the consequences of our actions. But he would show that battle damage assessment of like, hey, we knew that there were bad guys here doing this, and this is the imagery of the bombs taking out that site. And it really did a lot to motivate the crew that we deployed right after our country was attacked, and we were taking out the folks that had figured out how to do that.
You had mentioned that once you joined the Navy, there weren't a ton of women in the field at that time. So when you were on the ship, did you notice that much, or what was that like for you?
Not really, because it was my first experience, so I didn't have anything to compare it with. Looking back, I'm looking at the numbers. I mean, there were far fewer women. There were definitely far fewer women in leadership positions. But at the time, we didn't really notice. And I think especially because just the impact of 9/11 and what we were doing and how important the mission was, I don't feel like there was any difference in how things worked. There weren't some of the numbers of the senior leadership. So, my first ship, we didn't even have any Master Chiefs E9s that were women. When I went back to a ship, when I was on the commissioning crew of the USS Gerald R. Ford, and we had 3 women Master Chiefs, just in the ship's company. And so there's a huge difference in how it is now from how it was then. But, that first deployment, that was also the first deployment that every member of the crew had an email address. So it wasn't just the senior enlisted, it wasn't just the officers. So it was a really big time of change in a lot of ways. Like technology had made some really big shifts. That first deployment we used to have, it looked like public phones down in the mess decks, and that's how you called home. And by the end, by a couple deployments later, a couple ships later, we all had cell phones, and you can go onto Facebook on your computer in your work center, and so you only lose contact with folks when you're in River City, which is when we cut signals off the ship because something is about to happen. So the amount of communication that happens is a lot different. Mail call on my first ship was huge because that's, when all the mail comes from another ship, they deliver it to us. The hangar bay is filled with packages and mail, and the post office calls up, and like you go down by division to go pick up your stuff. And, that was just, it was probably always exciting, especially to get packages, but it didn't carry the same power later on because email and communication was so much easier later.
Huh. That's so interesting. Yeah, and I feel like there's no way to predict that. There's no way to know how it's going to change, and no more excuses for why you didn't call your mom. Yeah. She's like, I know you have email now and phones.
Yep.
You were blowing my mind with some of the stuff you shared about being on the ship and things. I just, not having much experience with Navy service members that you were telling me. What are some things that even surprised you or that people might not be as familiar with? Think is interesting.
So an aircraft carrier is a floating city. Okay. So we're, the biggest, largest presence on the water. So, we have our own fire department. And there's a saying that every sailor is a firefighter, and it's because every sailor has to go through firefighting training, because who's going to come save us?
Well, that's a good point I never thought about.
Yep.
Yeah.
We have our own police department. So we have our own security team. We have a post office. There's a ship store where you can go down and buy junk food or hats or shirts or things to do in your spare time. There are soda vending machines. There's candy vending machines. What else?
What about like for morale? Like when you guys needed a morale boost, what are some of the things they would do?
So there's a morale, welfare, and recreation team. Usually it's one person from each department that's part of that, and so you can go check out like a PlayStation or an Xbox. First deployment we were at PlayStation 2, and now I think we're at like PlayStation 97.
Yeah,
I'm not
exactly.
sure. But you can go check out different games and hook them up to your TVs or check out movies. And then we also, like my department, we showed all the videos. So we had movies that were constantly playing. Now we get like CNN International when we're underway, so that you can still keep up with the news. Our department also did like a broadcast, like a newscast. Short and sweet, and kind of talk a little bit about what was going on the ship and a little bit about what was going on out in the real world. And then there's a daily newspaper underway. And yeah, I mean, everything that you have in the real world, we have to have. So, nuclear powered ships, we make our own potable water.
I still can't get over that. That's crazy. But
It's-
not, you said only the Navy can do that.
Well, to the best of my knowledge.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know how to do it, so
Yeah, they
commendable.
take up the ocean water and clean it out. That's what we drink. That's what we take showers in.
Where was that in Castaway? That would have saved Tom Hanks a lot of trouble.
That's true. He should have just built a boiler. It would have been fine.
Where were some of the places that you went during your career? Because your 21 years spanned a lot of time. Like you said at the beginning, obviously you guys deployed to help support our efforts with 9/11. But where else did you go? That you liked?
So the first deployment, we didn't do very much because nobody really wanted a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier to pull in. Not when the threat level was still so high. So we only saw Bahrain and Marseille, France.
Okay.
And then, later on, I did a couple other port calls. I was stationed in Bahrain. I was stationed in Singapore. And that was great fun because I got the orders for Singapore and didn't know it was a country. So then I had to pull it up on a map. And I remember it's like when Google was still really new. And so I was like, I'm going to Google where Singapore is. And that makes me sound like an absolute dinosaur, but
No.
and yet it was true. So I was like, it's this little tiny country in the middle of Asia. Why am
Like,
I going
zoom out,
to Asia?
zoom out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's only 21 miles long, like it's tiny. But when I was stationed there, the tsunami happened.
The Boxing Day one.
The one that happened for Indonesia and Thailand. And so our little tiny, it's not even an American base, it's really a Singaporean base that we rent property on, was responsible for most of the response to that.
Wow.
And so that was interesting. And then we also do a lot of Southeast Asia anti-terrorism exercises. So I got to bop around a whole bunch of little countries that I also didn't know existed until I moved over there, which tells you a lot about my education as a child in the Midwest.
I'm Midwest too, so
I was like,
also
Brunei?
need to look up where Singapore is after this. Yeah.
It's beautiful. You should totally go visit it. There's a rainforest in the middle of it.
Perfect.
So, I got to bebop around there, and then got stationed in Bahrain again. Bahrain, I got to go to quite a few countries, also countries I didn't know existed, like Seychelles, which is
Like
amazing.
where?
Seychelles.
Seashells?
Seychelles. So also another island country off of the coast of Africa. It's just chain islands. Is
Shout out
so
to
pretty.
Seychelles.
It is so pretty. Like you'll look down and you'll see sea turtles and you'll see dolphins and you'll see all these fish and you'll think they're like right below your feet, but it's really like 30 feet down and it's just so
clear.
perfectly clear. And let's see, where else did I get to go? I spent a lot of time in Kenya. I spent time in Brazil. I spent a deployment in Afghanistan. Spent time in Kuwait.
Wow.
Yeah, it was.
So you met your dream of seeing the ocean.
Did. I saw the whole
You
world.
saw a lot of the ocean.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, that must have been a challenge though when it was like, how did you know maybe you were done with the Navy? Maybe it was time to like go on to the next chapter. Because originally you were like, we'll just do 4 years
Yeah.
and then I'll be out. And
Yeah.
it was a little more than that.
Right, yeah,
then.
I make bad decisions a lot.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it kept being exciting. And I was one of those folks, I never wanted to do the same thing twice, and I never had to. So, whatever sounded hardest, that was usually what I was like, I'm going to go do that. And what was a little too hard for me was COVID And
Yeah.
so I was a single mom at the same time COVID was going on, and I wasn't able to support my kid the way that I needed to, and at the same time support the command. And so it was time to go ahead and put my retirement paperwork in and set up a new adventure.
Must have been bittersweet though. What was that like, that transition period for
Whew,
you?
that was hard. I mean, there's so
Yeah.
many emotions, and in the military, our identity is so wrapped around who we are, and we're so isolated.
Yeah.
And not everyone, so that's a pretty general term, but for a lot of folks, we're really isolated. Like the base and the services that your military service provides, we can do everything that we need in life on that base. It's where you work, it can be where you sleep, it's where your gym is, it's probably where you buy food, it's potentially where you buy clothes, it's there's financial counselors there are mental health support available there, your medical and your dental is on there. You don't really ever need to leave. And so when it was time to retire, I also made the decision to go retire somewhere where I didn't know anybody, because that is also a great decision. But I wanted to have a farm. Like, I grew up on a farm, or I grew up on a homestead, and I wanted my son to have that same experience. And so I picked the middle of the mountains of Virginia and said,
Which you'd probably been to many times.
Sure, I
and
was
spent a
there. I
lot.
went there one time,
Yep.
and said, "This is great. We'll move here." And then I bought a house from a guy that I met on Facebook, sight unseen, because it was COVID and I wasn't allowed to travel. So
Okay, but your decisions do work out
They
in
do.
the long run.
They
They
do.
might be questionable at the start, but I see no reason to stop doing this.
Right. So the best part was everyone else was like, "You're crazy," and on the outside, I was like, "No, I have a plan." Well, I would like to tell everyone who said that I was crazy, I did not have a plan, and I was just winging it.
For the record.
But it's fine.
It worked out.
It worked out.
Yeah, and now you have Whittenberger Wilds,
Yep.
right?
So that's our farm, and we have a little bit of everything. We've got a donkey, and he likes to sing. And we have a bunch of goats with ridiculous names, and a pig who likes to sit for treats and get belly rubs, and
Don't we all?
too many dogs and entirely too many cats, chickens and ducks and a goose, and it's absolutely amazing.
Aw, it sounds like you built quite the life for yourself there, especially coming off, like we said, a bittersweet transition period, and can be difficult to find your footing when so much of your identity has been the Navy.
It is, yeah.
But you also noticed pretty quickly, being in that part of Virginia, that the access to resources, even the access to care, was more limited than some other areas. So just tell me what you're seeing once you got to that part of Virginia and what you were noticing about rural vets in general.
So I live in Floyd County, and Floyd County we're in the Blue Ridge Mountains. And our closest VA medical center, it says, is 45 minutes from my house. It really takes an hour and a half to get there, because
Not a straight drive.
It's
yeah.
not a straight drive. And there's switchbacks going down a mountain. And if it's raining, or if it's snowing, or if it's hazy, or if it's foggy,
Or if there's deer.
or if there's all the deer, every deer in Virginia is on that road somehow. It impacts your travel time. And so the first 3 months after I retired, I just kind of sat and tried to figure out, like, what am I doing? And then I spent about 6 months doing a lot of PTSD treatment and getting into the VA care. And there's a lot of, like, kind of initial appointments you have to do, and all the paperwork and all that, and figuring out how that works. One of the things that I first noticed is VA pushes, sign up for healthcare online. So I did that. And then about a day later, I got a call saying, "Yep, you're eligible. So now you need to go just call the VA medical center so that they can, like, own you in the system." So I called and 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 I called. And I'm like, okay, I've called like 12 times and no one's answering. I'm calling at like different times of the day because I'm thinking maybe I don't know when they have breaks or what their busy times. And finally I'm like, fine, I'll drive an hour and a half to get there just so that they can take me into the system, do the intake. And what I learned when I got there, and this was my very first impression, was I walked in the door of where they said to go to sign up, and the line was out the door, and everyone in that line was over the age of 65. And then when I looked in at the little office structure where they could have 3 workstations, there's one, and that phone just kept ringing. And I'm like, oh. That's why he never answered. There was no way. And I'm listening, because I'm nosy, I'm listening to what he's telling people because I'm trying to figure out, like, why is this? Why is it? Because I have nothing else to think about. So I'm like, well, let's look at this process, identify the issue. And it was, older gentlemen who are trying to get in there, but part of how the VA determines the copay system is based on your income, which means you need to bring in a tax return.
Yep.
And, the gentleman didn't want to share his tax return, or he didn't know that, or he didn't know where to get it from. And, something that's simple for me, I'm like, okay, cool, I did it on TurboTax, so I'll just pull it up on my phone, I'll show it to you, you'll see the number, we're good. It's not the same for different generations. And so what the guy was telling the veteran and what the veteran were hearing were two completely different conversations, and they're both getting frustrated, and the phone is still just
Ringing.
constantly ringing. And I was like, oh, there's a failure in this process. And so that was kind of the first thing that I noticed. And I was like, okay, this process was easy for me, but it's also very understandably not easy for others. And so all of my primary care and all of that is done through the Women's Health Center, which means like our PCMs are all women. Everybody who works back there are all women. And our PCMs, at least at the time, I'm not sure if this is still the case because I'm not sure how manning has changed. But the first question I asked was like, hey, are you overburdened or underburdened? And she said that she saw more individuals than any other PCM in the clinic because all of the women are pushed to the Women's Health Center. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. But I also got phenomenal care. And I really did appreciate that was the first time in a long time I'd had a doctor that actually asked like real questions. And anything that I said I wanted to have looked at, she was like, okay, all over it. And I got a call within a day to schedule those appointments. Some of the appointments were a long time.
Yeah.
But I really felt like the care is there, but it was the admin part that was not being supported.
And so instead of just going home and saying, well, that's too bad for them, but this ended up being good for me, you did not do that.
Right.
And you
Yeah,
started.
I have some personality flaws. So, part of that, like the first couple of months of retirement, was I purposely isolated to try to figure out what I wanted and like what was going to make me happy. And I did, like I said, I did all the bunch of PTSD treatment, a lot of really kind of thinking about like if now I'm a mom first, what does that mean? What does that look like? Like what am I going to see as success there? Because I'd never really thought about it because I was always so overwhelmed by all of the demands on me that I was just doing the best that I could at whatever situation was coming up. And now I had the opportunity to really, to be fair, I'm also very aware that I was very lucky to have that opportunity to take a step back and really define like what the future is going to look like and what my goals are. And so started realizing like, okay, I need to make a friend group here. I can't just be chickens and goats. And so, although they're really good conversationalists.
Yeah.
Yes, they will agree with everything if you have food in your hand, which is actually not that different than sailors, just to be clear. So you joined the local VFW post and realized a lot of the same things that I'd seen at the VA. Like, hey, these guys don't even know that they get a mileage reimbursement.
Yeah.
So, or that the healthcare rules have changed. And, I sit there and listen, and I was definitely the odd woman out because I was the only woman. And and my kid came to the meetings. Like he sat over there and played on his iPad, but he was the only kid because I was the only one that had a young kid. And that's such a huge difference was that, on top of the 20-year war, we also had families and we missed them.
Right.
So we don't use the post as a place to get away from our family. Like we want our family to be with us as much as we can because we know we missed out on a lot. And also, I think everyone should be subjected to having to watch hours of Minecraft.
Yeah.
So it's going to teach you something about yourself.
My dad takes me to our VFW post, and it's mostly chili dogs, which are delicious.
So we don't have
A lot
any
of
of
chili
that.
dogs. Really?
Nothing, no. No. But that was really when I started to acknowledge the cultural differences and the
like generational differences.
cultural and generational. So it's a little bit of both. So, we're all veterans in the first place. Its values are really independence, self-sufficiency, and family is everything.
Yeah.
So you don't go out and ask for help outside of those boundaries until you really, really need to. but you also don't ask for help if you have no idea that help is available, right? And so a lot of those Vietnam guys and the Korea guys, when they came home, they were told no, they weren't eligible for services. And then they never went back and asked again, but also why would they? If they didn't know that things have changed, why would they put themselves in the situation to be told no again?
Right.
And I think that is a very understandable reaction. So, you know, I was really lucky when I retired that we did the transition assistance program. So that's where they sit us down for a week and they spew a lot of data at you. And you probably understand about 10% of what they're saying because the people who are doing the presentations know it inside out. And then you're sitting there also focused on like, right now I still have all these 300 things due at work, but
Right.
I'm being forced to sit in this room, but I don't want to sit in this room because I have people waiting on me out there and those people matter. And it's also, you know, there's some deflection in there because you don't want to think about that transition because it's scary.
Yeah.
So, you know, they do a really good job of making you aware that like, hey, there are things. Go find the things.
Yeah.
Not necessarily like and I don't really think they could solve this. Like, this is your checkbook is you for what you're doing as a human, like, and where you're at. This is what you need to go do. But that's also probably a bridge too far to be
I wish.
feasible.
Maybe.
Yeah. And so I knew I'd get VA healthcare. I knew that I'd get, you know, that the housing benefits are out there. Like I knew that there was a lot out there, and I'm also computer literate. So now I'm like, like I'm joining these Facebook groups and I'm seeing how things work and I'm learning and I'm watching people complain and then I'm watching people respond to the complaints with like, hey man, like if you do it the right way, it'll actually work. Stop trying to cheat the system. And, you know, kind of like digging through all that and being like, okay, like this is what really makes sense and this is what should work. And even then, I wasn't aware of all of the stuff that was available.
Yeah.
And
You have to be an expert in a lot of ways.
you do, you know, and everyone's default answer is like, well, the VA should do that. Well, there's also State Department of Veteran Services, and the different states call them different things. But a lot of the time, that's the family support, that's the education support, and that's the employment support. But we don't talk about that, or at least we didn't when I did the transition training. And so there's this, like, VA is this huge organization. And I don't think a lot of people understand how big it is when we complain about it. The only department bigger is the Department of Defense. And you don't ask a Coast Guardsman what the Space Force is doing that day.
Yeah.
Right? And so we hear in the organization that I started, which we're getting to, we hear a lot of people be like, well, I asked my doctor about something that has nothing to do with doctorness. Right? And you can't, that is an unfair expectation. And so that's part of what I started to try to figure out because I wasn't aware of some of the education benefits that my son would get. And that's all through the Virginia does that. And starting to dig through it a little bit more and starting to talk to more and more people and then learning that there's other nonprofits and how the local, you know, public nonprofits like the Disability Resource Center or New River Valley, like they can do a lot for disabled vets and they have the stuff and they get grants to be able to support veterans. But nobody knew that. They're like, well, it's either the VA or nothing.
Yep.
But that's not the case. But it takes a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of like deciphering terminology because it's all different across whichever like category that you're looking at to figure out what's actually out there. So that's where Mountain Valor comes in.
Yeah, and it's a lot of time online, which going back to what you're saying, I mean, you're computer literate, like you said, so you're able to kind of dig in, and even then, you're like, geez, like this person has a different acronym for this thing, and there's this thing over here, and you're kind of relearning or teaching yourself all these segments of the resources that are available, and that's you being younger and, you know, a little more adept at that. So imagine how much more difficult that would be for the older generation.
I constantly joke that I need the world's biggest whiteboard and a whole bunch of red thread to try to be able to like connect how everything is actually tied together because it's nearly impossible for someone who doesn't already have an idea of what they're trying to find to figure it out.
And September 11th played a role in the organization you created too, right? So you're identifying these gaps, you're seeing things that there's a way for you to be able to step in, even though you already had enough on your plate. You got the goats, you got all these things.
The pig.
Yes, the pig. We can't forget Peony. But how did September 11th kind of play into what Mountain Valor has become?
So when I was building a friend group, I found a bunch of the GWAT vets, and because we all similar experiences and similar ages, and we were all sitting over at our buddy's campground, and Army vet owned, and we were just talking about just well, we were probably complaining about the VA. Is really how it started, and then because that's just really fun. Like you can just bond with any vet by saying, "Dang it, VA," and then you're in. You're good.
Yep.
You now you're a friend for life. And so we were sitting there, and we're like, "There's nothing for 9/11. Like there's a stair climb in Roanoke, and that Roanoke again is an hour and a half away from us, and there's nothing in our part of the state at all." And somebody was like, "Well, we could do a flag raising." And I'm like, well, "No, that's not." That's not enough. That's not that, like, we lost our friends, we lost our loved ones. Like, that is not enough for what we gave up.
Right.
And so we started talking about more, and then we're like, well, we should do a flag retirement ceremony, and we'll do it right, and we'll get a bunch of the veterans in here, and we'll make it so that it's something people want to attend. And then we talked about it a little bit more, and we're like, okay, so if we're gonna have all the veterans in one place, if we're really going to put that much work into it, we need to have the resources there for them. We also need to figure out who those resources are. And then, kept talking about it. And though I can't remember which one of us, but one of us was like, no, we won't use them. So it needs to be an environment that's family friendly, that you're there long enough to get comfortable, because it really takes you being in the right mindset to walk up to a complete stranger and be like, hey, I need your help.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's where Mountain Valor Fest came in. So we came up with the idea for the event. And then as we were talking about it, in the back of my head, I was like, oh, God, this is going to cost so much money. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to have a nonprofit. Like, that's the way to do this right. And long term, if we do this right and we get functional and competent, we can repeat this for other veterans, because it's not just our community that has this gap.
It's just so admirable, and I feel like there's something to, we can all spot the inefficiencies or the areas where there could be more resources or more support, but just so few are able to take action after that. And I just really admire that you didn't just spot a problem or a challenge, but that you and your friends or your neighbors came together and said, like, how are we actually going to be able to do this and sustain it beyond? You could have just done that first year and that would have been enough, but you're making it something that's able to reach beyond even the Floyd County community, which is really awesome.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. But we have an amazing team. And so that first year when we were talking about Mountain Valor Fest, people looked at us like we were crazy a lot. It was usually me. I was usually the one talking about it.
It's a common theme.
Yes, it's fair. So, there'd be a lot of like, but it's a resource fair, but it's going to be fun, and there's going to be a bounce house. And, people looked at us like we were insane, and they're probably right. But we still had 700 folks came that day. 130 vets got help that day. And we're like, okay. So now we have proof of concept. Not only do we have proof of concept, now we have photos and we have video, and we can be like, hey, but like, this is what happened. Like, we got the National Guard to bring in some Humvees. We got a helicopter from the Army Reserve Unit. So we had a Chinook there. And all the vets, what we were talking about was like, oh, I remember that smell. That is aircraft. That's all that is burning fuel, and burning oil. And so much fun stuff for the kids, and live music and food trucks. And in order to come into the event, you have a hay wagon ride down from parking to the old Coots table. You're welcome to buy some cranky old men, and who we handpick for their crankiness, cranky cheerfulness. And then in order to get to the food, or to get to the beer, or to get to the anything fun at all, you have to be funneled through all of the resources. So that way you're at least exposed. So then you go and your kid's on the bounce house, jumping around, you're listening to music, you're eating, you're walking around looking at stuff. On your way out, weirdly, you have to go right back through those resources. And so you've had a couple hours to really kind of think about it, and maybe a beer for courage, because that's what alcohol does for you.
Yes.
And you get that chance again to be like, hey, like, what is it that you do? And start that conversation. And, maybe you're not going to, like, at that moment tell them your entire life story, because this is what I need. But you can sign up for VA healthcare right there, and you can start a disability claim right there if you want to. But for most people, it's, I don't really understand what you do. And maybe I have a friend who, and that friend may or may not actually be you, but they get to ask questions and really start to recognize that there is a ton of support out there and they're not isolated. They're not alone unless they choose to be.
It's really special. And if there's people that are watching this that are in that area or that are close enough that they're willing to make the drive, when is it? How can they get involved? Or maybe if there's other veteran service organizations, their teams watching this, they're like, hey, we could be in that area and provide some resources. What would you tell them?
So it is September 13th in Floyd, Virginia, and we definitely have room for more resources. We will make room for more resources, and we do have a bunch of the standard veteran service organizations are coming. The Virginia Department of Veteran Services is bringing basically everyone and every different capability that they have. VA is coming out with a pretty big team, and we would love to have as many folks as we can get. More food trucks this year, more stuff for the kids this year. It's going to be really, really fun. And that's our goal, is that this is something that people really plan to attend every year. It's always going to be the Saturday closest to 9/11. At 4 p.m. there's always going to be a flag retirement ceremony where we'll remember our fallen. But the rest of it is really just about connection.
Well, it's amazing what you're building, and we're, all of us at Mission Roll Call, are happy to be able to help support and to spread the good word about it. So is there anything else you would want to share for Mountain Valor or for rural vets or anyone else watching?
Rural veterans are fascinating. I get to say that now because I'm one of them. It's hard to get information into rural communities. And when you look at where Floyd, Virginia is, and again, we're Blue Ridge Mountains, middle of nowhere, we are really lucky. We have fiber internet because the county went after a bunch of grants and ensured that we had a very strong fiber optic backbone, which means like my internet is better than I've had living
Ever?
in major, it was way better than Virginia Beach. But the counties around us don't. So they're still on very spotty connectivity, where trying to do a telehealth appointment, that's probably not going to work. The average age of rural veterans skews a lot older. So you're also talking people that aren't necessarily comfortable using computers. So, the default to, well, you need to go online and fill out this form. Okay, but somebody needs to sit with them and go through that form, right? And who's going to do that? Well, you don't really have anyone to do that. And we lose so many folks because of the assumption that if news is pushed out on social media that they're getting it. That's not where rural veterans are. And our assumption that somebody knows even what terms to put in a search bar, that's not how that works.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating for me to see that we have this huge gap, and we have all these vets that don't know that they're eligible for health care. And Virginia is the worst state when it comes to health care, with the number of veterans who are fully eligible but have never applied because they don't know, right? So the PACT Act came out, it changed eligibility significantly. They don't know.
Yeah.
And it's the assumption that it's going to be easy for a veteran to get to the VA. Well, it's probably not. And again, my county, and specifically like where my house is, I don't have the long gravel roads that wash out every time there's rain. But I do still have to go through switchbacks. And if it's raining, or if it's snowing, or if it's foggy, or if it's hazy, or, the moon is in the wrong phase, that road suddenly becomes significantly more hazardous. And you got to weigh what's worth it. Is missing an appointment worth?
Risking potentially something bad.
Right. And so, it's frustrating that there are so many limitations just getting rural veterans the support that they need. It's also, the other part of my brain, the part that used to run large teams, recognizes that when you expend money and expend resources, you want a certain number of people to be impacted. And you're not going to get those numbers in rural America.
Well, I have no doubt that you're impacting people, you're impacting your community, and the Mountain Valor will continue to do that. And just personally, I'm the daughter of a rural veteran. I obviously work for an organization that cares a lot about supporting them and providing resources, and it's been a privilege to talk to you. And I just thank you for all you've done and all you are doing to continue to support veterans and the veteran community. So thank you so much for being part of this.
Thank you for the conversation.
Of course. And please do find out more about Mountain Valor. Where can they learn more about your organization?
Our website is mtnva.org. MountainValor.org.
Easy to spell, easy to remember, and you can learn more about the Lassie Mission podcast and our other guests, more about Katt and VSOs like hers at missionrollcall.org.